Hello everyone. Welcome to Principles of ATATURK and History of Turkish Revolution course. In this program, we'll talk about the rise and development of the national resistance after the Mudros Armistice, Paris Peace Conference, the Grand National Assembly, and the Treaty of Sevrés. In our previous program, we talked about the Armistice of Mudros. After the armistice, the Allied powers started to occupy the Ottoman lands. The British forces occupied Mosul in Iraq and Merzifon'u, Kars, Ardahan, and Batum. The French occupied the Cilicia region, and the Italians took Marmaris, Fethiye, Antalya, and Burdur. Istanbul, on the other hand, entered into joint Allied administration. So, in this atmosphere, how was the socio-political situation? Wartime leading political figures of the Committee of Union and Progress had fled the country on the night of the Mudros Armistice. Liberals became the dominant force in official politics by organizing around Damat Ferit Pasha, who revived the Party of Freedom and Accord. Yet, the Allied powers attempted to influence and interfered with domestic politics. Although their leading figures fled the country, the Unionists continued to control the parliament, the army, the police force, the postal and telegraph services, and some other organizations. In this way, they laid the foundations of the national resistance movement in Anatolia. The Allied occupations, territorial claims of the Greeks and Armenians, and the trial of the Unionists triggered the Turkish resistance, especially in the occupied areas. Regional organizations called the Societies for the Defense of Rights were formed in eastern provinces, in the Black Sea province of Trabzon, in Izmir and Adana. Their aim was to preserve the rights of the Turkish population based on Woodrow Wilson's 12th point, and they tried to prove and show the Allied powers that in all these provinces, the majority of the population were Muslim and Turkish. As for the negotiations for peace, the peace conference with the defeated powers Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire started in Paris in January 1919. The Ottoman Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Arabs, and Jews were all represented by delegations. On January 30th, the Supreme Council of the conference, composed of Great Britain, France, Italy, and the United States, adopted a resolution. The resolution, in parallel with the secret treaties between 1915 and 1917, stated that they were all in agreement to separate Armenia, Syria, Mesopotamia, Kurdistan, Palestine, and Arabia from the Ottoman Empire. Starting in February, the Greeks, Armenians, and Kurds presented their territorial claims in the peace conference. The claims of the Greeks extended from the Balkan Peninsula to Thrace, Constantinople, Asia Minor, and the Aegean Islands. The Armenians, on the other hand, demanded an independent state of Armenia that would include the 7 provinces of Van, Bitlis, Diyarbakır, Elazığ, Sivas, Erzurum, and Trabzon, along with the Cilician Sanjaks and the province of Kars. Kurds also demanded an entirely independent Kurdistan state, claiming that the eastern Anatolian provinces that the Armenians claimed belonged to them. Their territorial claims extended from Caucasia to southeastern Anatolia and northern Iraq. The Ottoman government refused all claims made by the Greeks, stating that the majority of the population were Turks and Muslims in those regions. The Ottomans also argued in the 6 provinces that the Armenians claimed Muslims, Turks, and Kurds constituted the majority. While all these claims were being voiced, the Greek troops occupied Izmir with the support of Britain and France, who were in fear of Italian occupation of Izmir. The Greek army advanced brutally into western Anatolia, aiming to realize the Megali idea, that is, reviving the Byzantine Empire. The occupation of Izmir by the Greeks brought together political parties, societies for the defense of rights, students, and public in general. Through a memorandum, it was stated that the occupation of Izmir was in violation with the armistice terms and the Wilson's principles. The resistance took the form of mobilized armed action in western Anatolia, Thrace, the Black Sea coast, and eastern Anatolia. The occupation of Izmir led to the appointment of high-ranking commanders and officials to organize the national resistance. Meanwhile, the commander of Anafartalar Front in Gallipoli, Mustafa Kemal, was appointed as the general inspector of the Ninth Army. His main duty was to pacify and disarm the regional bands and the disarmament of the army in accordance with the terms of Mudros Armistice. Mustafa Kemal was also instructed to restore the internal order in eastern and north-central Anatolia. Mustafa Kemal landed in Samsun on May the 19th and immediately started to organize and unify national resistance. In Hausa, he began to motivate people to put up a fight against the occupation of Izmir and Manisa without hostile demonstrations towards the non-Muslim population. The meeting he had with the Ottoman officers in Amasya resulted in the declaration of the Amasya Circular, also known as the Manifesto of the Turkish National Movement. The Amasya Circular, which was sent to all civilian and military authorities in Anatolia, emphasized imminent danger about the unity of the motherland and the national independence, incapability of the Istanbul government, importance of the nation's efforts and determination for independence, and the necessity of the establishment of a national committee. The Amasya Circular also stated that a national conference would convene in Sivas immediately and that 3 representatives from each province must be sent to the conference. The Istanbul government was not happy with this manifesto, so ordered Mustafa Kemal back to Istanbul, but Mustafa Kemal resigned from his military duties. Before the Suez Congress, the delegates joined the Erzurum Congress. Among other things, the Congress reached the conclusion that the province of Trabzon, the district of Samsun, and the 6 eastern provinces couldn't be separated from the empire, and that national forces would be in charge of protecting the empire, the Sultanate, and the Caliphate. So measures and decisions would be taken for that purpose. It was also concluded at the Congress that the central government should convene the parliament immediately, and all decisions about the destiny of the nation and the country should be taken there. In addition, the Congress elected the representative committee as executive authority equipped with extraordinary power. In addition to Mustafa Kemal's efforts in the east and northeast, local leaders in the west organized similar congresses in Balıkesir and Alaşehir. Their aim was to act in organizing militia forces and drive the occupational forces away from the country with the help of a general mobilization. The most important step in the national resistance movement was the Sivas Congress in September. When compared to Erzurum Congress, a wider geography from eastern Anatolia to Thrace were represented in Sivas. The Sivas Congress reaffirmed the resolutions of the Erzurum Congress, rejected all occupation, brought all defensive rights organizations under one roof, and decided to force the Istanbul government to hold elections and reconvene the parliament with new representatives. The Istanbul government had no choice but negotiate with Mustafa Kemal. The negotiations took place in Amasya, and according to the protocol, the resistance leadership demanded the acceptance of the resolutions of the Erzurum and Sivas Congresses and the recognition of the Society for the Defense of Rights in Anatolia and Rumelia. Also, provinces inhabited by Turks wouldn't be ceded to enemies, no mandate would be accepted, the integrity and independence of the motherland would be secured, non-Muslims wouldn't be granted privileges against national sovereignty and social balance, and delegates approved by the representative committee would be sent to any peace conference with the Allied powers. After the negotiations in Amasya, the government agreed to hold elections in November and December of 1919. The elections resulted in full victory of the nationalists, and Mustafa Kemal was elected as the deputy from Erzurum, but he stayed in Anatolia. The parliament was opened in January 1920. In the same month, in a secret meeting, the parliament adopted the National Pact, that is, Misak-ı Milli, with the effect of the nationalist majority. The National Pact document was published in February, and the members of the parliament accepted the principles which in fact had been accepted in Erzurum and Sivas Congresses. The growing strength of the resistance movement disturbed the British. Having seen that the nationalist organizations forced the French to evacuate the southeastern city, Maraş, and to impose the peace terms to the Ottomans, the British forces officially occupied Istanbul. they declared martial law and dissolved the parliament. Damat Ferit Pasha was appointed as Grand Vizier, and Mustafa Kemal was condemned to death in absentia by a special decree. In response, Mustafa Kemal declared the Representative Council as the sole authority in Anatolia. Contacting the governors and commanders in the provinces, he circulated the decision for immediate elections and the establishment of a parliament named Grand National Assembly of Turkey. On April the 23rd, the new assembly convened with deputies from Istanbul Parliament and newly elected ones. Mustafa Kemal was elected as the president of the assembly. In the last part of this program, we'll talk about the peace settlement with the Ottoman Empire. In the early months of the Paris Peace Conference, a form of mandate was considered as the basis of a peace settlement with the Ottoman state. An American mandate seemed to be the most favorable one for the Ottoman lands, so the Americans investigated the conditions for mandate by forming two commissions. But the reports of these commissions were not taken into consideration during the peace settlement, as the United States withdrew from the negotiations in December. To shape the peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire, London and Sanremo conferences convened between February and April 1920. After these conferences, the Treaty of Sevrés was signed between the Allied powers and the Ottoman Empire on the 10th of August. According to the terms, Armenia would be recognized as a free and independent state. Its boundaries with Turkey would be decided by the President of the United States. Areas with predominantly Kurdish population would be autonomous. The Arab lands would be separated from the Ottoman state. Thrace, up to the outskirts of Istanbul, and the Aegean Islands would be given to Greece. In Izmir and its environs, the Greek administration was to be established for 5 years. A full incorporation of this region to the Greek state would be decided later. Straits would be under international control, but Istanbul would remain under Ottoman rule. In addition to all these terms regarding the territories, the size of the Ottoman army and navy would be limited under the Allied control. The army would have restricted armaments. In all financial matters, the Ottoman state would submit to an Allied commission. The capitulations would be restored, and the remaining non-Muslims would be granted extensive privileges. A delegation authorized by the Istanbul government signed the treaty. However, the government in Ankara rejected it because it completely contradicted with the National Pact. The Allied powers were aware of the fact that a military action would be necessary against the nationalists to implement the stipulations of the treaty. Although they were reluctant to do so at first, under strong British pressure, Greece's offer of a military action was accepted, which we will talk about in the next program. So, this is the end of our program for Chapter 7. In this video, we've discussed the rise and development of the Turkish National Resistance, Paris Peace Conference, the Grand National Assembly, and the Treaty of Sevrés. Join us for the next program. Goodbye.